Hey everybody, we're here for another episode of From the Gutter to Greatness, and I have some greatness here as always. You guys know that I am bringing you the best gutter to greatness stories that you could ever hear, and you know that it's about a shift in mindset, and it's about following your passion. It's about moving to what God wants you to move to, and we have a good friend and my brother here, and I'm gonna. Have him introduce and have him tell a little bit more about himself in a minute. But this brother here, I have to tell everybody, like he does it and he does it well. But he had a place where he started at, and so we're going to talk about where he started at to where he's at. And today's episode is listening more than you speak. And I say that, and the title of this show is because this brother listens really well, but has so much profound to say. And he listens, and then when he listens, he gives really good advice that's attuned with what I believe God wants for people. And so, listening to this guy helped actually change my life. So for those who don't know, so I met my guest here, Jeff Vargas. I met him some years ago, maybe 2013, 2014. And I don't even remember how we ended up meeting, but we ended up meeting, and it was divine because we were talking and just hit it off. Amazing energy. And we were talking, and he was telling me at the time I wanted to grow in my business and grow in doing other things outside of just education or being in a building, and was starting to move towards that way. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, you got all these good things in place, and I can feel it is going to happen." But he said, "You know what? You need a product." He said, "You need products. You need to get it out there. You need these pieces out there that people could sell, that is going to be residual, and these products are going to help you change and influence people and other things." And I said, "You know what? You're right." And so I went home, and I really turned around 2 books in a short amount of time. And then it put me on a different trajectory and a different journey that I wouldn't have been on if I wouldn't have had his advice, or if I wouldn't have listened. And if I would have blown him off, or I would have thought that I knew better than, like, it's so crazy because there's God puts people in your life for a reason. And sometimes there's people that you really need to hear from because they really got something you need to hear, because it could help take your life to other places. And so today I introduced Jeff Vargas, and I'm going to let him tell it. So the question we always ask, Jeff, is we always ask, tell us what you do and tell us why should anybody care. So, like, why the hell does anybody care what you do? Now, we're on From the Gutter to Greatness, so don't give the political bullshit answer, okay? We don't do that on here, man. So you got to give we give the real deal Holyfields on here. What do you do, and why should anybody care?
Man, well, first, let me just say thank you, because Dr. Miller, and that's how I'm going to address you this, even though I call you Paul, this episode is all about Dr. Miller, because when we talk about stories of gutter to greatness, and I'm going to focus on the greatness of really who you are as a person, I just want to acknowledge you, not just for the books, plural. Hello, all of you are thinking, man, should I write a book one day? Can I do it? You're talking to a man who's done multiple books. For the books that you've done, I want to give you credit for the podcast, the public speaking, the platform, the training, the corporate training, the individual training, the executive coaching. Look, the bottom line is you really do care about people. And we could drop the mic and end the story right there, because at the end of the day, if you don't care about others, it's so very hard to care about yourself.
Absolutely.
And I know for sure that you care about others, because I've seen it in action. And I've seen it in action because, again, what do I do? And why should anybody care? I love that question. Why should somebody care? I run my own leadership and professional development company. That's what I do now. We have 55 leadership and professional development workshops where we help people really create for themselves the best workplace that can bring out their skills, their abilities, really help them to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued. We got workshops on like how to lead through introspection and self-reflection, the power of pivot. We have workshops on generations. I'd say, for me, I'm leading this company, this learning and development company, having fantastic clients. I'm humble. We got clients like West Point, United States Department of Energy, City of Albuquerque. We got Boston Children's Hospital. We got all kinds of clients because at the end of the day, what are we doing? We're helping to facilitate learning. And so we're helping to facilitate learning. We're helping to facilitate professional growth. We're helping to facilitate people to move into their own greatness, just to allow them to be free and who they need to be, should be, and what the organizations want them to be. And, why should anybody care? I think in part, this world of ours, man, it's a lonely, selfish, sometimes even mean. It's a tough place. And I don't know about you, but I always appreciated it when I knew I had somebody in my corner. I always have a lot of people in my corner, but I needed to have somebody in my corner. And I'd like to think that why anybody would want to care about what I do is because I have the ability to see you, to hear you, to value you, and to amplify you, and to let you know that somebody does care, somebody wants to promote you, somebody wants to see your betterment, and somebody wants to see you succeed.
Yeah, thank you, man. I think those are good reasons for people to care. And I think just being humble, and I think what I want people to understand here is this brother is a Hispanic male. What descent are you from? Where are you from? Which island?
Come on now, you know the story here. So I'm Puerto Rican.
Right.
I'm officially Nuyorican. You know that story. So I was
Right.
born in New Jersey. I was born in Patterson, New Jersey, which, as
Right.
many of you may know, is an area that's had some significant poverty. So I'm Puerto Rican. My wife is Mexican, so our kids are Mexican. That's how that one works.
And you know what's interesting as people hear that, and as being a Latin man, as being a brown man who goes into these spaces, what people aren't understanding is you named a few of the clients, but this brother has these large corporate clients that typically, y'all, and I don't want to mess his hustle up, right? And I say hustle not as like doing something that's hurtful, but hustle like this how he eats his money, is he's in spaces that a lot of brown people aren't in. He's in spaces where it's predominantly white, and he's dealing with very, very large clients. And he has learned how to walk in that world, but still remain authentic to who he is. Like, you're never going to not understand that this is a Puerto Rican man. And so that he's never going to shy away from that or try to be something he's not, but he's been able to evolve and adapt and transition into be able to understand spaces. And in these spaces, he's been able to create opportunities for others to learn. And because he's in those spaces, he's been able to create change where if he wasn't in those spaces, they probably wouldn't have somebody who looks like him. They've had somebody who's probably whitewashed trying to do the same thing, who doesn't necessarily understand the same way. So I just want people to recognize and to understand that it's huge what you're able to do, and on the levels you're able to do it, and then how much time I know you spend helping others craft their pieces to grow and develop it, and often for free. And so, it's just, I all respect, man, and thank you for who you are and what you do. And, I just want to dig into your story a little bit. And, so little Jeffy, like he was a little boy in Patterson, New Jersey. And, we all have our struggles, and we all have our gutter. And gutter doesn't always have to mean where you are from or where you grew up at. It can mean your mindset. But what's your gutter to greatness? Where did it all start at? And what were some of the things that you had to go through to get to where you are now?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I was born in Patterson and moved from New Jersey to California. So I really grew up in California. I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up outside of San Francisco. I grew up in Daly City, California. And when I think about, sort of a gutter to greatness, I mean, my mom was a single parent. We were on public assistance. Little trivia, we didn't have a car in our family until we were 18. So if there was a place you wanted to go, right, you had to find a ride, and you better find a ride there. You better find a ride back. You better know that bus schedule. And I was a super fast runner when I was a kid. And a lot of the kids in school didn't know why. Well, it's because I had to run everywhere I would go. So there was no transportation option. And my mom was good because as soon as we arrived in a location and it started to rain, she was already looking for our ride home. You know, I got these two kids. I'm here. I'm going to make it. I wasn't an academically astute student as well. So, you know, if I saw something that looked like a 2.5, man, I was flying high. Life was good. So, you know, you're single parent on public assistance. You don't have a high GPA. And like many young men, like myself, Latino men, African-American men, we focus on sports and girls, and then more girls, and some sports, and then more girls. And so our focus isn't where it could be, and we're learning some things about ourselves and about life without having some mentorship. So I didn't start out in a place where success was on the horizon for me. And, you know, for me, you know, success really happened because of the leadership and the mentorship of African-American women.
Really?
And I say that there's a workshop that I give called How to Mentor Within and Diverse Communities. And I just gave a keynote address to 2,000 folks in New Orleans. And these are all part of all of them work for oversight for in the banking, the financial management area. 2,000 people. We talked about the importance of mentorship. My first 5 minutes was all about African-American women who helped me in my career, who without their help, I would not have been successful. You know, the short story of my career, I was the chief learning officer, Dr. Miller, for the nation's nuclear weapons program, the National Nuclear Security Administration that's responsible for maintaining our nuclear weapons capacity for our country. I was the chief learning officer in charge of that. I was the chief learning officer for the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. It's the part of the federal government that oversees the futures, options, and swaps financial marketplace, cryptocurrency as well, notionally valued at $600 trillion. I was a chief learning officer responsible for leadership, executive development, and technical training on both sides of the house there.
You know, what's crazy about that is, how the hell did they let you get in there? And you know, and I say that, man, with all due respect, because the odds of the suspended
sands on the beach.
It's like granular. But I heard you say it had to do with some of the mentorship and these certain Black women that had helped you climb. What was a little bit of that trajectory? What did they do? How did they help you? And then how do you mimic and model some of that in what you do?
Well, I'm gonna call it out by name. You got to name them and honor them.
Drop names.
Yeah, man. So for me, it began with Hazel O'Leary. Hazel O'Leary, who her most recent position was president of Fisk University. But before she was president of Fisk, she's done all kinds of stuff. But at a time in the early 80s, mid 80s, she was the Secretary of Energy.
Okay.
And I was trying to get into the federal government. And there's a connection here as to pivot moments, Dr. Miller, but I had a tragedy that happened in my family. My mom, her parents, who have been married for 60 years, my grandparents, died in a house fire.
Oh man, sorry.
And their death, I was busy doing my own thing, living my own life, making a few pennies. They were pennies. Now I know they weren't even nickels. I was doing my own thing. But that tragedy, I could spend an hour just talking about what it was like to lose them. They both died in the house fire, and they died because they lived in an underserved community. They're both Puerto Rican, and 2 counties in the Washington, D.C. area had a gray area that they shared resources. And on the night of their fire, 2:13 in the morning, one county kicked the responsibility onto another county, and they had a trainee there. Make a long story short, the fire truck took 21 minutes to get to their house.
Oh.
They passed away, as I said. And so I wanted to get in government. And I knew someone who knew Hazel O'Leary. And I literally wrote a handwritten letter, man. I said, I want to get in government. And if I couldn't help my grandparents externally, I want to help change how government connects with minority communities internally. You know what she did? She took that letter and she let people know of my interest. And she brought me through that letter. Then I applied and all that good stuff, but then I got on board.
You know, what's interesting about that to me is there's a lot of people, and especially in this today's generation, that would say, I ain't doing that, you know, or I'm not writing this letter. I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to humble myself. But it was something that you wanted and that you needed, and you humbled yourself and you put it out there, and you were able to get that back in return because she actually listened. And it, you know, so it must have been meant to happen. But then the important part is, I also heard you say, I still had to go through the process. I still had to put in the work. I
Yes.
still had to do certain things to get there, that things just don't happen without me putting forth effort too. Because I think a lot of times, Jeff, is that people want things to happen without doing the hard work that it takes to get there. And then they don't always humble themselves, and they have egos that are in the way, and it makes it so they often can't climb or move in certain ranks because of those their thought process. And so a lot of this to me is, how do we work to change their thought process so we can have more Jeff Vargases, so we can have more Paul Millers, so we can have the people who are in places that can influence and help create change in our communities. And I heard you say you got there because you wanted to make a difference. So you got in there. What do you feel that you contributed to actually make a difference when you got there? Because I know the government is a large conglomerate that does what they want to do. What did you do to make a difference?
So I walked in first with a phraseology that they use at West Point that we should be using every day, which is confident humility. You can be confident and humble at the same time. I might know something about X, Y, and Z, but here's what's crazy. What if I replaced blame with curiosity? I'm not doing that. Why do I say, tell me a little bit more about what's some of the outcomes that could happen if I did that. Help me understand a little bit about how it's going to benefit me. So when I started, once Secretary Leary put me through turned me onto the process. She wasn't part of the selection, but I got selected and I got it. My job then was to be the Hispanic Employment Program Manager for the Department of Energy. And so I was like, guess what? I believe, again, you're confident. I believe that there are Latino scientists and engineers out there that would work here. And I assembled people around the complex to help. And we were able to bring in 240 scientists and engineers that were Latino. Wow. And people said, how did you do that?
Big difference. Yeah.
Huge difference. And so those folks then in turn got into jobs and positions that were unbelievable in our country. It was never that they couldn't do the job. It's just that they may not have known how to get into the job. And then when I was there, I knew from day one that I had to do twice as much work, faster, with greater effectiveness and efficiency. I didn't fight that truth. I recognized that not only did I have an opportunity to be successful, I was going to be successful, because in not being successful, I'd be letting down my community, because my responsibility was to connect to the community. That was one part of my job. Second part of my job was to create outreach and recruitment engagements for the entire Department of Energy. And the second African-American woman came into my life, Thomasina Matthews. She passed away recently. And Thomasina said, Jeff, you're going to go further than me, but I'm going to give you every opportunity to be successful. When a meeting came up, she parked my chair next to hers and said, Jeff can do it. She said, you have unique presentation skills, Jeff. And I want to be able, and from day one, she gave me opportunities. She put me on interagency groups. So I got to make a name for myself throughout all of government, not just the Department of Energy, because of the work that Thomasina allowed me to do.
Wow. That's
and
important.
That positioned me to move on to the nuclear weapons program. I did some work in diversity and inclusion there, but I had gone to Georgetown for learning and development. So I had the background to lead a corporate learning function. And then the nuclear weapons program selected me to do that because I had built a reputation around the Department of Energy for 10 or 12 years. So people knew I could do really good executive enterprise-wide work. And they said, we want you to be the chief learning officer. And I served in that role. And I promise you, man, there were many nights I went home thinking, how's this Puerto Rican kid doing to have a car in that role? But It wasn't me who was in that role alone, man. God positioned me. He protected me. He guided me. He informed me. He led me. And graciously, he provided me an opportunity to serve. And through that program, we did a whole bunch of stuff I can talk about later, a whole bunch of stuff to help other people get into the department, help other people be successful. It's good. It was good. It was a very good time.
No, and I know that you've always been one who's been on a mission to follow what God wants for you and listen to what he has for you. Through all of that and knowing that you're a man of faith, what has been your largest challenge? What's been your largest struggle? What has Jeff done that has gotten in Jeff's way that people might be able to identify with, if there's anything?
Oh man, there's lots. I think for myself, I've had lots of moments of hesitation because I believe that I got to have the whole plan outlined and I got to be in control of the execution of the plan. And as I say that, I can almost hear God chuckling like, hey man, how'd that work for you? So for 5 years, as I was doing all kinds of great work in the government, God was saying, you know what, man, you can leave. And I'm thinking, why would you leave this job? You got 5 weeks vacation. You make great money. You're well respected. You got a staff of 12 or 15. They're doing lots of different work. You are in the sweet spot that everybody wants to get into. You got great health insurance. You're living in a great neighborhood. There's zero wrong. Why would you step out of comfort? Because God doesn't want comfort. He wants dependence. Right. And that was like, well, I don't want to be dependent. Here's what I want to do. I want to do my thing. And I want to be, that's not the way that he goes. And so how I would get in my own way is I would talk myself out of opportunities because they weren't fully baked enough for me to go forward. Mm-hmm. I needed a little bit more. So I was hesitant in terms of executing along the lines of faith when I needed to, until a series of things came up, and then it was time to step out. And then I didn't have everything that I said I needed to have in order to leave government. And if I had all these things, then I would leave. I didn't have any of those things. And I did this. I said, all right, Lord, man, I'm going to jump today. Ooh. I don't know if I got a parachute. I'm not sure I'm going to land. But I have got to trust you, man. And I know you're not going to fail me. You're not going to fail my family. You have never failed me in anything that I've done that I've been successful in. Your hand's been there. You've never failed me. So why do I need all this stuff set up and it has to be perfect for me to start? Why don't I just trust you? Let's jump, man. Let's jump. And I jumped.
Now, I remember the conversation when you were getting ready to make the move. And I remember also thinking that, wow, he's getting ready to leave a lot of security and a lot of like in a great spot. But then you're going to branch off, do your own thing. And I remember our conversation and we were talking about that God is telling you to do this and that you need to do it. And you're just going to leap and you're going to jump and you're going to do it. I just couldn't understand why Colorado, but like why the whitest place in America. But I was like, okay. You know what? At the end of the day, you know what? I love his testament for his faith. And I love the fact that he was going to take this risk. And then you've taken it and you've been able to transform this into this super successful, powerhouse business where you're doing this on such a high level. But I believe a lot of it has to do with your hard work, but the biggest pieces have to do with the fact that you listened to what God wanted for you, and now you're really doing some things with it. I just think that it's really a courageous moment that people need to think about, and the faith and the listening more than you spoke. So that, and when I say that title, listen more than you speak, it doesn't just have to do with you as a person. It's about listening to God more than you speak, and
100.
telling him what you want, but then being willing to listen when he comes back and tells you the way he wants you to do it. Um, and 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 what feelings did you go through when you were trying to figure out, am I going to listen or am I going to speak?
Well, I think a lot of young people can relate to this because I did not listen, man. He's like, you should go out. So the quick backstory, for 12 years, I spoke for free. Somebody wanted me at a conference, I do A, B, or C, because as a government employee, if you were speaking in another government entity, you could not double dip.
Right.
It's called double dipping. So the only thing they could pay for was your travel, but they couldn't pay for you to actually speak. And I was getting 25 to 30 requests a year for me to speak, but I couldn't get paid for any of them. And I thought, well, wait a minute. Well, what if I left government? And God's like, did I not tell you? I've been telling you to leave. And so I thought, okay, well, let me line these things up. But I couldn't, as a government employee, I couldn't line them up while I was there.
Right.
So I went through a lot of ups and downs. But for me, and it gives me that moment of pause, that emotional moment of pause. It was, I took that leap without having the security. And I didn't doubt myself, but I doubted whether or not I could meet the speed execution requirements that people might have. So the content I was okay with, but the speed execution, the setup, all of that. But here's what I knew for sure is that, as I said earlier, I knew God would not fail me because he hadn't failed me. That doesn't mean everything I wanted I got,
Right.
But his timing was right. It was either yes, hey, Jeff, no, or you got to wait. The important thing was I had to be open to listen to all three of those. And then the feelings that I have was that I know I needed to put in more time than I had ever before. And I needed to be open, and I needed to be open to direction from others, because I thought what I wanted. But when somebody said, hey, Jeff, do you have a workshop on? My first couple of years, no, we don't do that. My subsequent years was like, well, we don't do that because I haven't created one. I haven't validated the need, but somebody gave me an idea that I should be thinking about X, Y, or Z. Why didn't I take action? Because I was set on what I wanted to do. When I started to open up the aperture of what's possible and open these things up a whole lot more and listen with humility and engage with curiosity, man, the world changed.
Yeah, I agree. And I tell people all that, and I work with an executive coach, and I tell people to think in terms of questions instead of answers.
Yes.
And ask more questions than you do answers, because the questions are going to lead to the right answers, and you're going to learn so much more than you would by having, the typical response, or having the right away, I got this solution.
Yes.
Usually have about 10 more questions than you have solutions, and you're going to come up and you're going to be able to figure things out that you would have never been able to figure out. And, getting people to think like that sometimes is a challenge, but it is, when they do it, the light bulb clicks on. It's like, oh, I get this. This is making more sense. And I see why you're asking, or why you're doing this, or a lot of those things. Another thing that I really want to share or think about is, so growing up where you grew up, single parent household, rather disadvantaged. What were some things that Jeff needed to heal from? What were some things that were barriers and that you needed to heal from as a person so that you could get out of your way?
Yeah, man. First and foremost was my father passed away recently. He passed away about 9 years ago. And man, the only thing I wanted in my life was to have him around, saying something to me, doing something.
Right.
Every once in a while, blue moon, you get a phone call. Man, it made the world of difference. When I got older, he lived in Union City, New Jersey. I was in the Washington, D.C. area. I was a teenager. He's like, hey, man, you want to come and see me? Go ahead. And I'd save my money and I'd jump on the bus. I found myself at the bus station, and it wasn't cleaned up in those days, man. You had to keep your eyes quiet because they had all kind of ladies trying to proposition you. You got folks trying to sell stuff to you. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna go transfer this other bus. I'm gonna get to Union City. I take my 5-6 hour bus ride, and I knock on his door. He'd be like, what's going on, man? We'd have pizza together. I was in heaven, man. If I could spend any time with him doing anything, just being around him, man, I was in heaven. And I needed to heal from just the reality that wasn't what my life was. There wasn't anything that I could do to change those experiences. I love sports. Loved all that stuff, and I'm one of those guys. I wish my dad could have come to, practice a game, something, at least one thing, and he wasn't. But I had to heal and had to forgive. He made choices in his life that required him to live outside of the family life with my brother, my mom, and I, and I had to recognize that, and I had to see that he didn't have a lot of mentorship when he was growing up, so he made some tough choices, and at the end of the day, he was a good guy that, like many of us, man, sometimes you're a good guy, but you get off the path a little bit,
Right.
So when he was sort of in his last days, man, I paid for my 3 brothers and sisters. We all flew to Puerto Rico. He was in Puerto Rico at the time. My youngest brother had not seen him since my youngest brother at the time was like in his early 30s. He hadn't seen my dad since he was like 16. And my youngest brother and sister didn't grow up with us. They were in a separate family. But everybody came together. And as soon as my brother walked into the hospital room, man, all my dad said was, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. He kept crying over and over again. And my brother kissed him on the forehead. He said, hey, man, it's all good. Right. I needed to heal from what does it mean to be fathering yourself as a young man.
That's I had to do that as well, and it's still doing it, right? Because my biological father wasn't there, and my biological father, there would be times he would live in the same city, and I wouldn't see him for years at a time, or a phone call or anything, and then I think he moved, and it was always women, drugs, whatever he was involved in was more important, and we just I was never a priority, and became so angry because I always felt inside as a little boy, like, even though and I went through a lot of stuff on my mother's side of things too, but as a little boy I always felt like there was somebody in the same city as me who had the opportunity, had the ability to help me for what I was going through, and decided that I wasn't worth helping and wasn't there for. And so, like, it always made me angry. And I think, I'm going to make a hypothesis that it held me back, and the anger that I had for him for years. And I held that anger to where I didn't speak to my siblings on that side. I didn't speak to my family on that side. Even on my sister, on my stepfather who raised me, he was addicted to crack cocaine, and so, like, I didn't really have a lot of positive male role models, and so a lot of things I learned were the wrong things. And luckily, my faith and my foundation in morals and God were able to get me through. But those things are hard, and I will tell you that things really didn't start to open up until I really came to a place of forgiveness. And I'll be 46 next week. Right. And so, I say all that to say it wasn't to my early 40s to where I think I got to a place where I forgave him. I had started making some relationships with some of my siblings, but where I forgave him, and him and I had a conversation, and even today, like, I'm not mad anymore. And I sincerely have love for him. I don't necessarily look for him because I've been able to do on my own, and I don't think I need that anymore. If he looked for me, I would be willing to still entertain, but I'm not angry anymore.
Yeah.
And as I've been able to heal and let go of that, I feel like a lot has opened up for me.
Yes.
And things that don't even have anything to do with that, but it's given me the ability to do so much more. So I empathize, and I understand that causes and can hold people back, because there's a lot of our Black and brown young men who do not have their fathers in their lives. And so, one, shame on those fathers, because every child deserves a father. And two, um, when you don't have a father, it's how do you deal with it? And we all developed our ways. Like mine, I had developed vices that maybe not the healthiest, specifically around women and some other things like that. But with all that being said, as I've worked towards getting through it, it has really opened things up. And so my encouragement for people out there is to work through and to forgive and to heal. And so how did you see your life change as you began to heal and you began to forgive?
Well, this is so powerful, man. And thank you for making the space for us to have this conversation and open it up for folks to be able to join us, because this is a very deep place that brown and black men, we don't talk enough about. But for me, once I just decided that I'd forgive him. My mom, who's 92, lives with me.
Right.
This lady is the beacon of encouragement. Let me tell you, she learned how to text message. You want to see something that's funny? She learned how to text message because I'm traveling, whatever the case is. I'll get a text to say, hey, son, I just want to remind you, you're a good man. You're a man of faith. You're helping people. I love what you're doing. It might take her 20 minutes because she has sight issues. She can't see.
Right.
Or she's learned to do, I can speak into the phone, and then you hear a whole conversation with her sister. You got a whole text message. So on one side, I had absence. On the other side, I had abundance.
Right.
So it evened itself out to a degree. But for me, life changed when I said, you know what? And my dad came from Puerto Rico. He lived in New Jersey, worked, he came when he was 19. He didn't speak any English really. And he worked in a factory that makes dog collars, right? He was a good looking dude, and his attention, he caught people's attention. They caught his attention. And he didn't have the mentorship and the way to get it. How can I be angry at a man who made choices because he didn't know another way? So I had to put myself in his situation and recognize that it's like asking somebody to do, algebra 2 when they're having trouble with math. Maybe they could do it, but maybe they can't. And they needed some help to get along the way. He never got that help. So he was distracted mostly by women his whole entire life until he passed away. And that affected him. I had to forgive him for that. When I forgave him for all that, it allowed me to see not people. It allowed me to see the best in people differently, because it allowed me to take into account their circumstances and their opportunity and see them for both their intent and where they are. Now, if you had struggles and you don't have good intent, it's going to be hard. It's hard to go anywhere or stay anywhere.
Right.
But if you've had struggles and you want to work through those struggles and you have great intent and vision, man, that can work.
What skill does someone need to work through those struggles?
3 things, man. 3 things. For me, I think the first thing you need mentorship. And it goes back to what you said earlier. For all of us, you got to humble yourself and say to myself, I got to find me a mentor, somebody who has the skills, ideals, experiences that could help me in my life. And I got to ask them if they would mentor me. Here's the crazy part. There are more yeses than you would anticipate. But some folks are like, well, they should know who I am. And if they did, they'd want to mentor me because I'm going places. What?
Yeah, that's silly.
Now, if you're authentic in that way, you approach somebody. I'll give you an example of a mentor that I had. When I was in charge of learning for the nuclear weapons program, we put together a leadership conference. We did an analysis. Who's the most well-respected leadership person in the world at that time? His name is Dr. Ken Blanchard. Dr. Blanchard has written 65 books on leadership. If you look him up on Amazon right now, he's a top. The Grand Canyon School of Business is named after him. I can go on and on. So my responsibility, find Dr. Blanchard. I did. Secure him to be our keynote speaker. I did. And in the process, we got to know each other. And at the end of the At the end of the conference, we're talking about staying in touch. And I said, Dr. Blanchard, it'd be awesome if you'd mentor me. He said, I'd love to do that. You're the top leadership person in the world. So Dr. Blanchard has been my mentor. He's invited me to do workshops with him. I've been on stage with him. He charges $40,000, $40,000 to $60,000 to have breakfast with him. And one day he's coming to DC. He's like, "Hey Jeff, my breakfast. You want to?" I said, "Yeah, man, I'll come have breakfast with you." I brought a friend of mine who's loved it, read 20 books, 20 of his books. I brought him. You know what Dr. Blanchard did? He said, "I know Jeff. I want to get to know you, Glenn. Tell me your story." Here's the thing. By the way, his lunchtime speaking fee, $80,000 to $120,000, right? He could work 10 days a year and be a millionaire. 10 days.
That's nice.
What did he do? He gives back, man. What did he teach me? He says, "Jeff, everyone who's a leadership student, give them all the answers. Help them to be A+. Don't make them struggle. Help them to love themselves." All kinds of stuff he's taught me along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But it started with us having a conversation to be so mentorship is real. Mentorship is key.
And and before you talk about the other 2 points, just to speak on that, I got to tell people that Jeff is very authentic and what he's saying to you is real. This isn't like for the podcast, because we were having conversations off air, and there's things that there's a lot of things that Jeff knows that I don't know, and so I've continuously asked for mentorship over the years, or asked for advice, or asked for a conversation, and he's never turned me down. He's always made time. He's always willing. And then, even we set up something for us to have a call, I believe, in a week or so that, I can learn some of the things that, so I can continue to grow. And so, and for me, it's important what you're saying is to also give back. Like I just had meetings with people today that for a few hours that I gave back to them because they're in a different spot than I'm in. And so I think that's what it's with the whole mentorship, that it really has to be one hand washes the other, and you have to support each other. And then you have to help people grow, and then watch them grow, plant the seed, and then trust that they're going to now help someone else grow. And now you continue to have a beautiful, lush garden because you're doing these things. And so you said there was 3 other
back, right?
Right.
That's the key. Right. Real mentorship is, I just want you to be successful. Whatever happens for you, happens for you. I got a mentor now that works in the area of energy efficiency and renewable energy. He laughs because I tell him this. He was a 19-year-old knucklehead, didn't know what kind of color hair he wanted when I met him. Man, that guy did $30 million in business last year.
Wow.
He's killing it. And why is he killing it? And I joked him the other day. I said, when I come out to California to see you, here's what's going to happen. You'll pick me up from the airport. I'm going to put my wallet in the glove compartment. I'm not taking that out now because you do it all right. Right. And he laughed. But the point is, I've been mentoring him for 15 years. God has blessed him amazingly. And the reality is, to your point, 100%, you got to be authentic. You got to be present. And you got to cheer for people louder than you would even cheer for yourself, because to much is given, much is required. And loving people even more than they love themselves, encouraging them even more than they encourage themselves, man, that is a gift and a requirement if you've been given something. And you, Dr. Miller, has been given tremendous talents to help educators and beyond be better, be present, be engaged. You do that and then you help people who want to do that better. It's an amplification of the requirement and the vision and the capacity and the leadership that you've really been granted. And I believe that's the same way. So it is mentorship, and there's a couple more that are sort of critical to give yourself that focus.
Right. And those it's with me. And sometimes when I'm working with people, Jeff, and I don't know if you go through this, but I do a lot of executive coaching. Yes. And sometimes I feel like while I'm working with them, I feel like God is speaking to me and giving me messages to give to them. I don't know if that, I know some people are going to believe that, right? Oh, yeah. So I feel like God put certain things on my heart to help shift them in the right directions, and stuff that they need to hear, in the right questions, and puts things on me to say that they need to hear, or in a way they can hear it, so that they can move from their gutter to greatness in whatever area that's in. And what's so crazy about that is, like, a lot of people, if they're not spiritually connected, they don't necessarily understand that. But I feel so many times, and where God uses me as a vessel, and He gives me the right words to say, and He tells me exactly what they need to hear. Do you have any of those moments too, or what does
Look,
that look like for you?
you know what I love? This is this is unscripted, man. This is
Right.
the beauty of having a conversation with you. Look, watch what I'm gonna do. It will only take me about less than 30 seconds. I'm gonna pull up a message that I got. Is that my phone ringing? Hopefully not. Okay. I'm gonna pull up a message that I got, or I have to stop this thing. This is gonna be
That's
funny.
all right.
All right. Uh, you
That
know
sounds
this
like
is
the
where
old
the-
the
you know
old bell phone. Like you still got a home
this is-
phone or something.
no,
Like
no,
the
no.
old,
That's my
like
internet phone for my business. But
okay,
I'm
like
like,
the old phones that are
yeah,
rotary, and,
no, yeah,
and
it
that are
sounds
on the
like it,
wall.
right?
And like when your mom hit you with the chancleta because you were on the
Like,
phone too
where
long.
are you? Where are you gonna come in? Okay, good. I apologize, but that just makes our conversation real, and that gave
Yeah,
me a chance to. I'm gonna read something to you, man.
please.
That I got from an attendee at one of my workshops, specifically speaks to what you said. You ready? Here we go. I'm just pulling it up. She
Yeah.
said, "Hi, Jeff. I was at the conference last week in New Orleans, and I had the chance to attend 2 of your sessions and attend your keynote presentation. I appreciate your time, lessons, and personal stories. You were the highlight of my experience. Thank you so much. I was in a dark place, and I'm working on healing, and you've been my bright light."
And a lot of times hearing those things are all the payments that you need,
Hey, man.
because
Yeah.
you made a difference in this woman's life, and she needed to hear what you were saying at that time, and you were speaking to her heart, and God must have put it on you to say something that she needed to hear, even if no one else in the room heard it, which I'm sure they did, right? But there was something that she needed to hear. And that's some of the power and some of the uplifting pieces of doing this work, and being able to work with others, that I enjoy so much, because I come away energized when I see the lights turning on for people, and see that now they're going to use what we've been able to talk about to help them be better, stronger, faster, whatever it is,
Yeah,
right? And to
right.
be able to do the things they want. And a lot of it comes to trying to hear what God is saying to me, so I can say it to others. But how do you know when God is speaking to you?
Yeah, I wish there was a button. There was like a, hey, that's it. I think for me, it's in the pace and the cadence that it both hits me, and then it's the responsibility that I feel after I hear those words. So when I get that voice, like, no, go ahead, Jeff, accept that. That's way below your fee, man. But go ahead and do that. Why? Well, God's got something for you, and I know that when my daughter and I have a little bit of a gift. We can feel the energy of people in a room.
Right.
And she just turned 17, and it's amazing to watch her experience it. But we can be somewhere and we know what the case is. She walks with a hedge of protection around her. I'm going to talk about her in just a minute, but she walks with a hedge of protection around her. One of the things that we both have experienced is when God tells you, and sometimes it's, I need you to X, Y, and Z, and there's a level of immediacy. Another is, I need you to prepare for, and I need you to be available for, right? So, example, this lady, I'm at this conference in New Orleans. I knew that there were certain people, because I saw it, I felt it in the room, that we were doing an exercise on self-affirmations. And the lady looks up. We go through this whole thing, how an affirmation is, how do you do it, right? And how you can give your kids affirmations, your friends, but now it's to self. And while everybody's writing, I had them write 5 self-affirmations through this constructed sort of exercise. She looks up at me with tears in her eyes, and she's like, I can't do it. Your moment at that time isn't to be facilitators, to be healer.
Right.
is to be present and to be open for God to direct you to do something you did. You didn't walk into that workshop planning on being a healer that day, but
Right.
you humbly accept that role, not for you, for anything for you, but so people can see him. And in that area of responsibility, you're connecting with the people he wants you to connect in the way he wants you to connect for purposes that are beyond both of you. That person gains a new level of confidence, and you're able to do work that you were brought into. And you also got paid for.
Right. I think as we think about those things, and and I wonder for the people who are out there listening, how much time do they take to listen, um, more than they speak, and then how and what advice would you give for someone to kind of reverse what that looks like? Because I'm sure there's been times where maybe you haven't listened. So so
Plenty.
what so what happens when you don't? What happens when you don't listen? What does that look like? So
Oh, that's the easy part. When I don't listen, outcomes that I did not anticipate and not necessarily in a good way show up. Like man, I feel like I have had my entire life like the Tesla of warnings, you know? Like, when you're in a Tesla, you can see every car around you. You got the 360 view.
right.
Like, I feel like God has always given me that. But you know what? Here's the thing. If you don't look at that dashboard view, you don't see the 360, you're going to run into something.
Right.
And for me, there's been times where God's like, you should leave that alone. And you know what I did? I didn't leave it alone. And it's cost me, right? And so for me, life doesn't look as healthy as it could is when I don't listen to God, and I like to negotiate or reason with God. Well, what if I did this? And then when I put myself outside the box and look at our conversation, I got to giggle because, does God need me to suggest something different? No. Like, I know, Jeff, without you, I created 9 billion people or whatever is 8.7 billion people. I've done pretty well. So that little suggestion you have, that doesn't serve me. It serves you, man. So I gotta, the best thing I can do sometimes is laugh at myself when I'm trying to put myself in what I think is an advantageous position, because God doesn't want me to be comfortable. He wants me to be dependent.
Right. And what did the changes look like in order for you to start understanding that? What type of changes did you have to make? What did you need that someone else could say, yeah, I need to do that? That made it so that, because the truth of anyone who's listening can hear that you have had a lot of success and continued success. But I also hear you saying there's times you didn't listen and there was something that needed to change. What was that change?
Well, for me, as I said earlier, the first impetus for me and change was when I had this huge tragedy. And the changes I needed to make at that time in my life was to learn greater humility and to really put myself in a position of service. So I think one of the things that people can benefit from is recognizing that there's far more opportunity, success, richness in life when you authentically decide to serve someone else, serve your community, serve people around you. That was the case. And then the second, it really is focused on my daughter. She's 17 now, but when she was 18 months old, she wasn't hitting all the milestones that kids hit. And as an educator, milestones are what everybody talks about, right? And so, but hers were more on the physical side. Make a long story short, we had a assessment done and found out that she had cerebral palsy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember parking the car, and there were 12 steps that I walked up, and my mom was at our house at the time. And when I got to the house after we had this assessment, I said, Mom, my girl has cerebral palsy. I collapsed in my mom's arms and I cried, and I cried like a baby. And I sat on the bottom of the couch and I just opened up my legs. My daughter was crawling. She crawled over to me and I was just hugging her. 18 months old, Dr. Miller. And she turned to me and she said, Poppy, it'll be okay.
Wow.
That moment in time, man, that moment in time changed me, because I knew I had to listen to anybody and everybody to help this girl walk. She did not walk until she was over 5 years old. And
Okay.
she walked because, here's the whole listening part. Somebody that we knew told my wife and I about an alternative physical therapy opportunity that was outside of insurance. So it was going to be very expensive, but maybe she could walk. I was like, let's just pay it out, see what
Yeah.
can happen. And she was able to do that. Fast forward till today, that girl's a 4.2 GPA, man.
Amen. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
She is killing it. And you'll love it because we can say this on your podcast. I said, look, her name is Sochi. I said, look, Sochi, I'm not paying for nothing. You are Latina, female, you're a 4.2 GPA student, and you have a disability. Hey, look, man, you
Your
just
ass
paid.
going to school for free.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
And you take
good.
those moments, right? And here's what I love, Dr. Miller, I love this. And this is, for your education community. Every day, people discount my girl. They look at her and she'll say, Dad, today someone decided to talk slow to me in the classroom. You know what she does? She's like, where's that AP class? Let me be the top person in it. Oh, by the way, I'm not in a special class for folks who have challenges. I'm in a class that you're trying to get into. So she says, I may not be able to walk, run with you, but academically, I'm going to lap you. And here's the thing that we got to recognize. In our community, we got greatness.
Absolutely.
And we've got to help call that out. Even when people have circumstances that might not look great, there's greatness in us. And that's the lesson that my daughter has taught me. And look, man, there's a class I developed and I've taught on allyship. It's because of her. Because what father would not do anything for his daughter? So I think I know how to be an ally for my daughter. She had to teach me how to be an ally. And it's a workshop now that I help corporations figure out how to become and serve as a diversity and inclusion ally, how to be invited into that space. She's taught me an awful lot, but the most important thing she taught me to do is to listen outside of my ego, be curious, and take actions that somebody else wants with the knowledge base that you have to position them to be successful in ways that are unimaginable.
I want to thank you, Jeff, for coming here today. And as we close out, I want to thank Jeff Vargas for coming. And again, it's about listening more than you speak. And Jeff had to listen to his daughter, and she helped change his life. I'd say all my kids have helped change my life in some sort of way. But listening and being there for them has been such a priority and so important to me, and we talked about briefly how we both were fatherless, but how important it is to be a father and to be a father for your children, and to your kids don't deserve to have to go through that gutter. And so then to be there for them the way that the person wasn't there for you, and also you will be blessed. But at the time your blessings start, you also have to, what I heard Jeff say is, be humbly confident and be able to accept the blessings as they're coming to you, and then work for more as it's coming. And don't allow yourself to be complacent and just fall into whatever there is given. Just like his daughter has said, instead of, feeling bad or down, she's rising to the top and reaching the highest levels that she could reach, regardless of what disabilities that she may have. And there's no reason why, if this 17-year-old girl can do it, that you can't do it. And so we all have that power and ability inside of us to reach these levels and reach these heights. But it starts with you listening more than you speak. And that has been our episode for today. You have now had another episode from the Gutter to Greatness. Tune in for our next episode. I can't wait to be with you again. So as we get some more greatness on this show, until next time, be greater later, and we'll see you soon.
That's it for today's episode. So head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener that posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing for a $25,000 private epic VIP day with Dr. Miller himself. Be sure to head on over to guttertogreatness.com and pick up a free copy of Dr. Miller's gift and join us on the next episode.